I was on my third glass of wine when my phone buzzed with a breaking news alert from the Chicago Business Journal. I set down the glass and swiped the screen. The headline read, "Local tech CEO arrested for embezzlement and tax fraud. Fiancé's family foundation also under investigation." I read it 3 times, waiting for the satisfaction to hit. It didn't. I looked around my apartment, at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, at the minimalist furniture I'd picked out myself 3 hours ago when I'd finally made partner. Everything looked the same as it had 10 minutes ago. The same gray sky outside. The same half-empty wine bottle on the counter. The same silence. Except now there was a new sound, my own heartbeat, too loud in my ears that I scrolled down to the comment section, something I never did. The first one read, asterisk, "Looks like Carr may finally caught up with the tech bro, good riddance." Asterisk, but the second one made me freeze. Asterisk, wait, isn't his ex-wife, that private equity woman, the one who just foreclosed on that church downtown? This whole thing sounds like a revenge plot straight out of a TV show. Asterisk, I locked my phone and threw it across the couch. It bounced off a cushion and landed on the floor. A revenge plot. That's what they thought this was. That's probably what my parents thought, too. That's what everyone at church probably thought, that I'd done all of this out of spite, to punish them for giving away my inheritance, to humiliate Mark in the most public way possible. That they weren't entirely wronged, but they also weren't entirely right. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself another glass of wine, even though I knew I shouldn't. The first 3 had already blurred the edges of my thoughts, making everything feel a little softer, a little more bearable. I needed that right now. Because the truth was, when I'd first found out about the inheritance transfer, I hadn't been angry. I'd been heartbroken. I sat down at the kitchen island, wrapping my hands around the wine glass. The cold from the glass seeped into my palms, grounding me. I let myself remember the moment I found out, 6 weeks ago, sitting in my office on a Tuesday afternoon, my assistant Jessica poking her head in with a worried expression. "Lynn, there's something you need to see. It's about your trust account." I looked up from my spreadsheets, still in the middle of running numbers for our latest acquisition. "What kind of something?" The bank flagged a wire transfer. $3 million RS. Withdrawn last week.
이들아우가
Actually laughed. Because that was the kind of thing that didn't happen to people like me, people who watched every dollar, every decimal point, every single line of every single contract that came across my desk. But then I'd pulled up the records myself, and the laughter had died in my throat. The transfer had been authorized using my father's signature. My mother had co-signed. They were on the account as secondary trustees, a formality I'd never bothered to change because, they were my parents. They'd helped me set up the trust when I graduated from business school. They'd promised to look after it until I was 30, at which point the full control would pass to me automatically. That I was 29 and 8 months old, they'd waited until I was almost 30 to take everything. I remembered calling my mother that afternoon. I'd kept my voice steady, professional, like I was negotiating a deal. "Mom, I need you to explain something to me. There's been a withdrawal from the trust account. $3 million RS. The bank says you and Dad authorized it." There was a pause on her end. Then, "Oh, honey,
We've been meaning to tell you about that.
tell me now." Her voice had taken on that soft, patient tone she always used when she was about to lecture me. "Lynn, your father and I have been praying about this for months. We've watched you work yourself to the bone, chasing all that money, and we've seen how it's changed you. You used to be such a sweet girl. Now you're so harrowed, so cold." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white.
Mom.
"The money. The church needs it more than you do," she'd said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "They're building a new community center for the youth group. And the cathedral needs repairs. The roof has been leaking for years. Pastor Tom said the congregation needs to step up, and we realized we have this trust fund just sitting there, and you've got all your own money from that job of yours, so really, $3 million RS. I'd repeated because I couldn't seem to get past that number. That was grandfather's life savings. He worked at that restaurant for 40 years. He gave us that money so I could have a future. And you do have a future, honey. A beautiful future. But not if it's built on money. Not if it's built on greed." I'd hung up after that. I hadn't screamed or cried or thrown anything. I just sat in my chair, STA rang at the glowing monitors, and felt something inside me go very, very quiet. That was the moment I'd stopped being their daughter. That was the moment I'd become someone else. A week later, I'd STA route looking into the financials of St. Trinity Cathedral. It was purely professional curiosity at first. I wanted to understand how my parents' money was being used, whether it was actually going Tawa RD, that community center and roof repair, or whether someone was skimming off the top. What I found instead was much juicier. The cathedral had taken out a second mortgage on the property 5 years ago, during a financial crunch. The debt had been packaged and sold and repackaged so many times that by the time it landed in my firm's portfolio, nobody had even bothered to check the original collateral. It was a classic Wall Street mess. And my firm specialized in cleaning up messy debt that the mortgage documents were sitting in our files for 18 months before I found them. I had a junior analyst pull everything related to the cathedral's finances, and when he handed me the file, I almost didn't believe what I was seeing. My firm held the deed, that we had the right to foreclose, that I sat on that information for 3 weeks. I didn't tell anyone, not my partners, not my team, not even my assistant. I just watched. I watched my parents go to church every Sunday. I watched them donate more money to the building fund. I watched Pastor Tom talk about the generosity of the faithful from the pulpit, and I waited. Then the wedding invitation arrived, and my wait ended. I remembered STA ring at that piece of cream-colored CA rootstock, Reading, Massachusetts RK, and Caitlin's names, seeing the date and the location. St. Trinity Cathedral, Chicago, Illinois. They booked the venue using funds that probably came from the very debt I now held. Something in me had snapped. But it wasn't the loud, dramatic kind of snap. It was quiet, controlled, like a spring coiling tight. That was when I'd made the call to my legal team, that was when I'd set the foreclosure in motion. That now, 6 weeks later, MARK was under criminal investigation. Caitlin's family foundation was being audited. The church's management was scrambling to figure out how to keep the doors open. And I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking wine, feeling nothing but tired. My phone buzzed from its spot on the floor. I ignored it, then it buzzed again, and again, and again. I finally stood up, walked over, and picked it up. 3 missed calls from my mother, 4 texts from Pastor Tom, and 1 message from an unknown number. That I opened the unknown one first. Asterisk, I saw the news. I know you're probably drowning in calls right now, but I wanted to say thank you. Not for what you did to the church, but for what you did to Caitlin. Asterisk, I frowned. Who is this? 3 dots. Ape read, Disape read, Ape read again. Then, asterisk, it's S.A. Ra. M.A.R.K.'s sister. Asterisk. I almost dropped the phone. At S.A. Ra and I had been friends once a long time ago, before M.A.R.K. and I had gotten married, and then gotten divorced. We'd lost touch after the split. I'd always assumed she'd sided with her brother. Asterisk, I know I'm the last person you expected to hear from. Asterisk, she continued. Asterisk, but I had to tell you. Caitlin has been awful to my whole family. She's been manipulating MARK, turning him against us. When I found out she'd been stealing from his company. Asterisk, asterisk, wait. Asterisk, I typed back. Asterisk, you knew about the embezzlement. I suspected. I didn't have proof. But now it's all coming out, and I'm just relieved. For the first time in months, I feel like maybe things can go back to normal. Asterisk, ISTA read at the screen. Normal? What did that even mean anymore? My mother called again. I let it go to voicemail, then I dialed a number I'd saved in my contacts a week ago. After the meeting at the cathedral, he answered on the second ring. Lynn, hey, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I didn't wake you up, did I? It's almost midnight. I was awake anyway. A pause. Are you okay? I looked down at my wine glass, then at the broken wedding invitation still sitting in my trash can, then at the city lights glittering beyond my windows. I think so, I said. I think I'm actually better than okay. Is that so? Yeah. I think I just realized something important. Tell me. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. I think this whole time, I was trying to get revenge on the wrong people. I was so focused on MARK and Caitlin and my parents and the church that I forgot one person. Who? Myself. I let out a breath, slow and long. I forgot that I'm the one who got out. I left MARK. I made partner. I built a life that I actually love. Sure, I'm angry about the money. And I'm angry about all the lies. But the best revenge I can get isn't even about any of them. It's about me staying happy. I heard him inhale on the other end of the line. Lynn, he said softly. That's the SMA rudest thing you've said all week. I laughed, and it felt real for the first time in hours. I've been known to have a SMART thought every now and then. We should celebrate, he said. You know, once this whole thing blows over. I know a place that makes the best pasta in the city. Not the fancy kind, the homey kind. The kind your grandfather would have approved of. I bit my lip, feeling something warm spread through my chest. Are you asking me out on a date, Mr. Shin? Depends. Are you saying yes? I looked out the window, at the dark water of the lake, at the distant lights of the suburbs where my parents were probably still praying for my soul, and for the first time all night, I felt a real smile spread across my face. I'm saying yes. I said tomorrow. There would be more calls to ignore, more news to process, more legal battles to fight. Tomorrow, I'd have to figure out what to do with a cathedral I didn't really want to own and an ex-husband I didn't really want to think about. Tomorrow, I'd deal with all of it, but tonight I was going to sleep and when I woke up, I was going to remember that I was the only person who got to decide what my future looked like, not my parents. Not MARK. Not Caitlin. Not the church. I hung up the phone, washed my wine glass, and walked to my bedroom. I looked in the mirror on the way, at the woman with tired eyes and messy hair and the faintest trace of a real smile. She looked like someone who was going to be just fine. She looked like someone who was ready for the next chapter, and honestly, that was worth more than $3 million RS any day. I fell asleep with the taste of victory on my tongue, and it tasted exactly like freedom. Wei Wan Dai Shir, Ming'er Gung Xin Biar Zhong, Shi Huanda Balbui Jita Danji Dingya Anyu, Ming Kan Wam Yichi Kankalin, He Singyurda Na Dunwan Fan Daldi Yomyo Tricha, Yiji Nadzo Jiaotong. Zoi Ho, Jiujing Walosui. The dinner was at a place called Tony's, tucked away in a neighborhood I'd never been to before. It was the kind of spot that didn't have a website or a Yelp page, just a red-checkered tablecloth and the smell of garlic and tomatoes that hit you the second you walked through the door. Shin was already there when I arrived. He'd gotten a table near the window, and when he saw me come in, he stood up. He was wearing the same gray sweater from the cathedral, but somehow it looked better in the dim restaurant light. You came, he said, and there was something in his voice that I couldn't quite read. I said I would. I slid into the booth across from him. I'm a woman of my word. He smiled. It was a small smile, but it changed his whole face. I know. That's one of the things I like about you. I felt my cheeks warm. I blamed it on the restaurant's heating. The owner came over. Tony himself, a round man with flour on his apron and a booming voice. He shook Shen's hand like they were old friends, then turned to me. So this is the famous Lin Shen, he said. The one who finally made Shen talk about something other than stained glass. Tony, Shen said, and there was a warning in his voice, but it was gentle. Don't SCA-re her off. I'm not easy to SCA-re off, I said. I've been in private equity for 12 years. Tony laughed and clapped me on the shoulder. I like her. You keep this one, Shen. He desape read into the kitchen, and I was left sitting across from Shen, suddenly oury that I had no idea what to say. So I said the first thing that came to mind. Stained glass. He winced, but he was still smiling. I might have spent a few too many hours talking about the cathedral's windows. Tony's a patient man. He seems like a good friend. He is. Shin picked up his water glass, swirled it. He's the one who told me to stop hiding in the church and actually do something about my life. I think he's been trying to set me up for YRS. The fact that I brought you here means he's going to be insufferable for the next 6 months. I laughed. It came out louder than I'd expected, and a couple of people at NEA-RBY tables looked over. I didn't see a reap, so tell me the real story, I said. Why the cathedral? Why not take over your father's company? Or START your own? Or do literally anything else with all that money? Shin was quiet for a moment. He turned his glass in his hands, watching the light catch the water. Because my father built his career on demolishing buildings like that one, he said finally. He'd buy up old churches, old schools, old community centers, and he'd TR them down to put up luxury condos. It made him a fortune. It also made him miserable. Miserable. He died of a heart attack at 62. The doctors said it was stress. I think it was guilt. Shin looked up at me, and his eyes were serious. He left me everything, but he also left me a list. A list of every building he'd ever torn down, every community he displaced. He told me in his will that I was supposed to fix it. I read at him. That's actually really sad. It is, but it's also a gift. He leaned back in his seat. The cathedral is the last one on the list. Every other building he destroyed has been rebuilt or replaced. But St. Trinity, that one was always too expensive, too complicated. The land alone is worth a fortune. Nobody wanted to touch it, until I came along. Until you came along. He met my eyes. You have no idea how long I've been waiting for someone like you. The words hung in the air between us. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Someone like me, I managed. Someone who sees the numbers, he said, but also sees the story. Someone who's not afraid to play dirty, but who still has principles. Someone who, he paused, somehow, inexplicably, got stuck in the same mess I'm in. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. That's a very generous way of saying someone who's also a mess. A beautiful mess, though. I picked up my menu and hid my face behind it. You're impossible. I've been told that before. The food came then, and it was better than Tony had promised. The pasta was handmade, the sauce was rich and savory, and I ate faster than I'd eaten anything in months. Shun watched me with an amused expression. What? I asked, mouthful. Nothing. It's just nice to see someone enjoy food. Most of the people I know pick at their salads and talk about their macros. I have a macros policy, I said. It's called if it tastes good, eat it. Shun laughed. It was a good laugh, and genuine. I realized I wanted to hear it again. We talked for hours after that. He told me about his father, about growing up in a house that was too big and too quiet, about going to architecture school, and finding out he was more interested in preserving old buildings than building new ones. I told him about my grandfather, about the restaurant, about Leah running to count change before I could count to 100. I told him about my parents, about the church, about the steady unraveling of my relationship with them over the ARS. You don't talk to them at all, he asked. Not since the foreclosure. I pushed my empty plate aside. They called a few times. I let it go to voicemail. Do you think you'll ever try again? I thought about it. 6 weeks ago, I would have said no without hesitation. But sitting here, in this little restaurant, with the GA Rulik and the wine and the easy conversation, I felt different. I don't know, I said honestly.
Maybe.
Eventually. But not until I'm ready. And I'm not ready yet. Shin nodded. That's fair. Tony came back out to check on us, and he insisted on bringing us dessert. It was some kind of tiramisu that was so good I almost cried. This is dangerous, I said, pointing my fork at Shin. You're going to ruin me for other restaurants. That's the plan, he said, and the look in his eyes made my stomach flip. By the time we left Tony's, it was past midnight. The street was quiet, lit by old-fashioned lampposts that cast golden pools of light on the sidewalk. Shin walked me to my car, hands in his pockets. I had a good time tonight, he said. I know you probably have a million things to deal with. The church stuff, the press, your parents, but I want you to know that if you ever need a break from all of it, I'm here. I looked at him, at the way the lamplight caught his features, at the earnestness in his voice. Are you always this sincere? I asked. It's kind of throwing me off. He tilted his head. Is that a bad thing? No. I stepped closer to him. It's just different. Most people I know say one thing and mean another. I'm not used to someone who just says what they're thinking. I'm a simple man, he said. I like old buildings, good food, and women who tell the truth. I was close enough now to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. My heart was beating too fast, and I knew that if I didn't do something, I'd lose my nerve. So I stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't a long kiss. It was just a brush of lips, tentative and sweet. But when I pulled back, Shun's hand came up to cut my jaw, and he kissed me again, deeper this time when we finally broke apart. I was breathless. Okay, I said, my voice a little shaky. That was, yeah, he agreed.
It was.
I got in my car and drove home with a stupid smile on my face. I didn't think about Mark or Caitlin or the church or the money. I thought about the way Shin's hand had felt on my face, the way his eyes had softened when I'd kissed him, the way he'd said, yeah, like it was the only word that mattered. I parked in my GA rage and sat in the dark for a few minutes, letting myself feel happy. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah, Mark's sister. She'd called me earlier in the week, and I told her I'd listen to whatever she had to say. Now she was texting again. It's my mother, the message read. Asterisk, she had a stroke tonight. She's in the hospital. Mark's here, and he asked me to call you. He wants to see you. He says he needs to tell you something before everything goes to court. Asterisk, ISTA read at the screen. The stupid smile was gone, and I typed back. What does he want to say? Asterisk, he wouldn't tell me. But he looked SCA red Lynn. Really SCA red. I've never seen him like this. Asterisk, I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the steering wheel. A week ago, I would have said no. I would have told Raw that Mark could tell whatever he needed to tell to my lawyers. A week ago, I was still angry, still hungry for revenge. But tonight was different. Tonight, I'd had dinner with a man who made me feel like I wasn't just a number on a balance sheet. Tonight, I'd kissed someone and meant it that I was still angry. I was still hurt. But I was also, for the first time in a long time, maybe okay that I texted Sarah back. Asterisk, tell him I'll be there tomorrow. Noon. St. Mary's Hospital. And tell him he's got 15 minutes. After that, I'm done. Asterisk, I sent the message and got out of the car. My legs were shaking, but I wasn't SCA red. I was something else, something I didn't have a word for. Relief. Closure, letting go maybe. It was just the knowledge that I'd survived the worst of it already. I'd survived losing my inheritance. I'd survived the divorce. I'd survived watching my parents choose their church over their daughter. If Mark had something to say to me, I could handle it, what he said, though, that I wasn't prepared for it all. The next morning, I walked into St. Mary's Hospital at 11:59. I'd put on my best professional clothes, the black blazer, the pencil skirt, the heels that made me feel like I could take on anyone. I found Mark in his mother's room. She was asleep, hooked up to a dozen different machines. Mark was sitting in a chair next to the bed, and when he saw me come in, he stood up. He looked terrible. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes were rumpled, like he hadn't changed in days. This wasn't the polished, confident man who'd sent me a wedding invitation. This was someone who'd been broken open. Lynn, he said. Thanks for coming. Your sister said you needed to talk. I stayed by the door. I said 15 minutes. RT talking. He took a breath. Then he said something I never expected. It wasn't just Caitlin, he said. It was your parents too. I felt my blood run cold. What are you talking about? Your parents, he repeated. They came to me last year. They said they were worried about you, about your soul, about your job, about all the money you were making. They said the church needed funds, and they wanted to convince you to donate. But you wouldn't listen to them. So they needed another way. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. They asked me to help them access the trust account, he said. They said if I did it, they'd make sure you forgave me for our divorce. They said they'd tell everyone it was their idea, that I was just following their instructions. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Lynn, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it would come to this. I didn't know they'd take all of it, or that you'd find out, or that you'd. He trailed off, looking at me with desperate eyes that I turned around and walked out. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked down the hospital corridor in my black heels, and I made it all the way to the parking lot before I leaned against a pillar, and let out a single, RP breath. My parents, it had been my parents all along, not just the money. The divorce. The months of feeling like I was losing my mind, like I was the unreasonable one, like there was something wrong with me for wanting to build a life and a career and a future. They'd taken everything from me, and they'd done it while telling themselves it was for my own good. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I'd been avoiding for weeks. My mother answered on the first ring. Lynn Sweet, Artie. Thank God. Don't, I said. Don't call me that. Don't call me anything. I know about you and Mark. I know you asked him to help you steal my money. I know you've been lying to me for months. There was silence on the other end. Then, Lynn, let me explain. I'm done explaining. I'm done listening. I'm done being your daughter. I hung up before she could say anything else.
And then, for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. 未完待续，明日更新第3章。喜欢这个故事的话，记得订阅哦。下一章，林恩和沈玉的关系会有意想不到的进展，而那座教堂的秘密才刚刚开始浮出水面。I didn't tell Shin about the hospital conversation.
Not right away did I spend 2 days in my apartment, working from home, answering emails, pretending everything was normal. I looked at spreadsheets and signed off on deals and talked to my partners about quarterly projections. I did all the things I was supposed to do, and I did them well. But every night, when the city went to RK and the lake turned black, I sat on my couch and replayed Mark's words. Your parents came to me last year. They said they were worried about your soul. They asked me to help them access the trust account. I'd spent weeks blaming Mark for everything. I'd spent weeks plotting my revenge against Caitlin, against the church, against everyone who'd wronged me. I'd assumed my parents were victims, misled, manipulated, praying for my soul, but not really understanding what they were doing. And now I knew the truth. They'd been the architects of it all. On the third night, S.A. Ra called me. I almost didn't answer, but I was tired of hiding. Lynn, she said, I heard what my brother told you. I wanted to say, I'm so sorry. If I'd known he was involved with your parents, I would have told you sooner. It's not your fault, I said. You didn't know. Neither did I. But I should have seen it. Mark's been different since he met your parents. They're intense people, Lynn. They really believe what they're saying. I laughed, and it came out bitter. They believe I'm going to hell, S.A. Ra. They believe that stealing my inheritance was the same as saving my soul. There was a pause. Then S.A. Ra said, I know you probably don't want to hear this, but Mark is trying to make things right. He's been talking to a lawyer, trying to figure out how to return the money he took from his company. He's not going to fight the divorce anymore. He's not going to ROI Caitlin. None of that makes up for what he did. I know. I'm not asking you to forgive him. I just thought you should know. Another pause. He asked about you. He wanted to know if you were okay. Tell him I'm fine. Lynn, tell him I'm fine. I repeated and hung up. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and texted Shunda. His reply came within seconds. Always can I call you? The phone rang before I could even type anything else. What's wrong? Shin asked. His voice was rough, like he'd been asleep, but it was also steady. Grounding. Nothing's wrong, I said. I just needed to hear a voice that wasn't inside my own head. Is this about the church, the foreclosure? No. I took a breath. This is about my parents. And Mark. And the fact that I've been lying to myself for months. Shin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Do you want to come over? I make a mean cup of tea. It was 2 a.m. I was wearing sweatpants and no makeup. But I said yes anyway. Shin lived in a small apartment above a bookshop in Logan Square. It was cluttered and cozy, filled with shelves of old books and architectural drawings and half-finished pottery projects. He met me at the door in a worn-out t-shirt and pajama pants, and when he saw my face, he didn't say anything. He just pulled me inside. We sat on his couch with 2 mugs of tea that I mostly let go cold. I told him everything about Mark, about my parents, about the hospital, about the RS of feeling like I was fighting a battle I didn't understand. Your parents really think they're helping you, Shin said when I finished. That's the worst part. Right, I could handle it if they were just greedy or cruel. But they honestly believe they're doing God's work. They think stealing from me was an act of love. Is that why you haven't talked to them? I thought about it. It's part of it. But mostly, I haven't talked to them because I'm scared. Of what? Of them being right. I looked down at my cold tea. What if they're right? Shin, what if I've become exactly what they think I am, cold and hard and obsessed with money? What if all that praying they did was just them trying to save me from something real? Shin set down his mug and turned to face me. Lin, look at me. I did that. Your parents raised you to believe that you need to be saved, he said. That's what religion does sometimes. It makes you believe you're broken so it can offer you a cure. But you're not broken. You're not cold or hardy or obsessed with money. You're a woman who survived losing her parents, her marriage, and her sense of identity in the span of 2 months. And you did it while staying kind, while staying honest, while staying yourself. I felt my eyes burn. I'm not kind. I foreclosed on a church. You foreclosed on a building that was in debt. The people who lost it were already losing it. You just made it official. He reached out and took my hand. There's a difference between being cruel and being practical. You've never been cruel to anyone, Lin. Not even to the people who deserved it. I squeezed his hand. That's a very generous reading of my character. Take the compliment. I don't give them easily. I laughed, and it was wet and broken, but it felt good. We talked until the sky sta route to lighten. Shin told me about his father again, about the list of buildings, about the feeling of riding a ghost's unfinished business. I told him about my grandfather, about the restaurant, about the way I still dreamed in Chinese some nights, even though I hadn't spoken the language fluently since I was a child. You should call your grandfather, Shin said. If he's still alive. He died 5 years ago. Then call the person who reminds you of him. I thought about it. I thought about my Aunt Helen, my mother's older sister, who'd never gone to church, who'd always told me I was perfect just the way I was. She lived in Seattle now, and I hadn't talked to her in almost a year. Maybe it was time. When I finally left Shin's apartment, it was past 6 in the morning. He walked me to my car, and this time, he kissed me first. Thanks for coming over, he said. Thanks for trusting me. Thanks for being awake. He laughed, and it was the best sound I'd heard all week. I drove home with the windows down, letting the cold morning air clear my head. The sun was coming up over the lake, pink and gold and full of promise. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I called Aunt Helen as soon as I got home. She answered on the second ring. Lin, is that really you? Hi, Auntie. I know it's been a while. I stopped. I hadn't planned what to say. I just wanted to hear your voice. Sweetheart, you sound tired. Are you okay? I saw the news about the church. I tried to call your mother, but she wouldn't pick up. We're not talking right now, I said. It's a long story. I've got time. She paused. And I've got a feeling you need to talk to someone who isn't going to judge you for it. She was right. She was always right. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, and when I was done, she said, your mother and I have disagreed about a lot of things over the years, but I never thought she'd do something like this. Neither did I. Are you okay, Lin? Like, really okay? I thought about Shin. I thought about MARK. I thought about the cathedral and the foreclosure and the $3 million RS that still felt like a wound in the center of my chest. I'm getting there, I said, and Aunt Helen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I have something for you. Something your grandfather left for me before he died. I've been holding on to it for years, waiting for the right time to give it to you. What is it? A letter. He wrote it the week before he passed. He said if I ever saw you sad or lost or confused, I was supposed to give it to you. I felt my breath catch. Can you read it to me? She paused. I think you should read it yourself. I'll mail it to you today. Overnight. You'll get it tomorrow. Thank you, Auntie. Thank me by being happy, sweetheart. That's all your grandfather ever wanted for you. When I hung up, I sat on my couch and read at the wall. The sun was fully up now, flooding my apartment with light. Tomorrow, I would get my grandfather's letter. Tomorrow, I would find out what he'd wanted to tell me, but today I had a call to make. I dialed Pastor Tom's number. He answered on the first ring. Lin, I've been praying for you. Save your prayers, Pastor. I have a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? I'm offering to restructure the church's debt. You won't have to pay back the full mortgage, just a portion. And I'll give you 5 years to do it. There was silence on the other end. Then, why would you do that? After everything. Because I'm not my parents, I said. And I'm not the person they think I am. I'll send the paperwork over by the end of the week. I hung up before he could say anything else. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. But it was something, a step toward RD being the person I wanted to be, not the person my parents had tried to make me. And for now, that was enough that I spent the rest of the day in a daze. I sent the paperwork to my legal team. I answered a few more emails. I took a long shower and ate a bowl of soup and did all the things that normal people do when they're trying to hold themselves together. When night fell, I went to bed early, and when I woke up the next morning, there was an envelope waiting for me in the mail to my grandfather's letter. I held it in my hands for a long time before I opened it. The handwriting was shaky, the way it always got an AR the end. But the words were steady and clear. Asterisk, my dear Reslin. Asterisk, if you're reading this, that means you're going through something hard, something that makes you feel like you don't know who you are anymore. That's okay. That's normal. That's part of being alive. Asterisk. Asterisk, the thing I've learned in all my years is that the people who love you most will sometimes hurt you the most. Not because they're evil, but because they don't know any better. They see you through their own fear, their own wounds, their own brokenness. They can't see you clearly. Asterisk, but you can see yourself. That's the gift you've always had, Lynn. The ability to look at yourself honestly and say, this is who I am, and I'm okay with that. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Asterisk, I'm proud of you. I always have been. And I always will be. Asterisk. With all my love, asterisk, Grandpa, asterisk, I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. 未完待续，明日更新必须中。喜欢的宝贝记得订阅，下一章健康的秘密会彻底揭开，而恋和星儿的关系也会走到最关键的一步。The letter from my grandfather sat on my nightstand for 3 days. I read it every morning when I woke up and every night before I went to sleep. The words stay root to feel like a part of me, sinking into my bones the way his voice used to when he'd tell me stories in the back of the restaurant. I could almost hear him saying them, the way he'd pat my hand and say, "You're okay, little one. You're okay." But on the 4th day, I got a call that shook everything loose again, that it was my mother, that I almost didn't answer. The screen flashed her name, and I read at it for a full 10 seconds, my thumb hovering over the decline button. But something made me pick up Lynn. Her voice was different. Softer, thinner. I know you don't want to talk to me. I know you're angry. But please, just give me 5 minutes. I didn't say anything. I just waited. Your father is sick, she said. The doctors found a tumor last week. It's not good, Lynn. They're giving him 6 months, maybe less. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the phone pressed to my ear, and I couldn't find my voice. He's been asking about you, she continued. He wants to see you. He wants to apologize. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, and maybe he doesn't either, but I'm asking you anyway. Please come home. Home, that I hadn't thought of that house as home in yours. It was just a building now, the place where my parents lived and went to church and prayed for my soul. It had stopped being home the day they'd taken my money. But there was something in my mother's voice that I hadn't heard in a long time. Something that sounded like fear. Okay, I said. I'll come. I drove to the suburbs that afternoon. The leaves were changing, orange and red against a gray sky. I remember driving this same route as a kid, sitting in the back seat while my parents argued about money or church or both. They'd always argued. They'd always loved each other anyway. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The white siding was faded, the front porch had a crooked railing, and the garden my mother used to tend was overgrown with weeds. I knocked on the door, and when it opened, my mother looked like she'd aged 10 years. Lynn. She reached for me, then stopped herself, her hands hovering in the air like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to touch me. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I said I would. I stepped past her into the house. It smelled the same as it always had, like potpourri and old Sierra pet and something baking in the kitchen. My father was in the living room, propped up on the couch with a blanket over his legs. He looked thinner than I'd ever seen him, his face gaunt and pale, his eyes sunken. But when he saw me, something lit up in his expression. "Lynn," he said, and his voice cracked. "You came." "I came to listen," I said. "I can't promise anything else." He nodded slowly. He looked down at his hands, which were shaking slightly, and took a breath. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know I've said that before in different ways, but I mean it now. I'm sorry for what we did. I'm sorry for the money. I'm sorry for putting you through all of this." "Why?" I asked, and my voice came out harder than I'd intended. "Why did you do it? Why did you take everything from me?" My mother sat down on the arm of the couch, her hand on my father's shoulder. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "We were SCA red," she said. "When you divorced Mark, we saw you pulling away from everything. You stopped coming to church. You stopped calling. You stopped being the person we raised. And we thought if we could just get you to see that we were right, that the money was the problem, that God could fix everything. You thought stealing from me would make me come back. We thought it would make you stop," my father said. "Stop running. Stop chasing all those deals, all those dollar signs. We thought if you had nothing, you'd have to slow down. You have to look at your life and see what really mattered." I read at him. "You stole $3 million from me. And you're trying to tell me it was for my own good?" "Yes," he said quietly. "I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like an excuse. But we believed it, Lynn. We really believed it." I felt something crack inside me. Not the hard, cold snap of anger, but something softer. Something that felt like grief. "You took my future," I said. "You took the thing grandfather left me. You took everything he worked for." "We know," my mother whispered. "We know, and we'll never forgive ourselves. But we want you to understand. We didn't think we were hurting you. We thought we were saving you." I sat down across from them, on the old Aram chair that used to be my grandfather's. I looked at my parents, the people who'd raised me, who'd taught me to be strong and independent and good, and I saw them clearly for the first time in Yarest. They were just people. SCA red people. Broken people. People who'd made terrible, unforgivable decisions because they thought they knew better, and I didn't have to forgive them. I didn't have to pretend it was okay, but I could let go of the anger. "I can't promise I'll forget what happened," I said. "I can't promise I'll ever trust you the same way again. But I can promise to try. I can promise to show up. If that's what you want." My mother root crying. My father reached for my hand, and this time, I let him take it. We talked for hours after that. About the church, about the money, about all the I'd spent trying to be someone they could be proud of. They told me about their own their own disappointments, their own belief that they'd failed as parents because I'd stopped believing in the things they believed in. By the time I left, the sun was setting. My mother stood on the porch and waved until my car turned the corner. I drove back to the city with a heavy heart, but it was a different kind of heavy. Not the crushing weight of anger and betrayal, but the slow, sad weight of letting go. That night, I called Shin. "Are you okay?" he asked. "You sound different. I went to see my parents today." "Lynn." His voice was concerned. "How did it go, Hard?" I said. "Really hard. But I think it was the right thing to do." Sure, not really. But I'm trying." Shin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've been thinking about something. Something I should have told you, liar. It's about the cathedral." "What about it?" "The records go back further than I thought. I was looking through my father's papers, and I found something interesting. The land the cathedral is built on, it used to be owned by a family named Chen." I felt my heart stop. "What? There are deed transfers from the 1940s. An elderly couple sold the land to the church for a fraction of its value. Their last name was Chen. I don't know if they're related to you, but I thought you should know." I sat in the dark of my apartment, my phone pressed to my ear, and I thought about grandfather. I thought about his letter, about the words, "The people who love you most will sometimes hurt you the most." I thought about the land that my family had once owned, the land that was now tied up in debt and lawsuits and church politics. Maybe this was what I was supposed to do with all of it. Not just get revenge. Not just walk away. Maybe I was supposed to rebuild something. Can you send me those papers? I asked. I want to see them. I'll bring them over tomorrow, he said. We can look at them together. Shin, yeah, thank you. For staying. For not giving up on me. He laughed softly. I'm not going anywhere, Lin. You should know that by now. When we hung up, I sat in the dark and cried, but these TRS were different. They weren't angry or bitter or sad, they were relieved. The next morning, Shin showed up at my door with a box of papers and a bag of bagels from a place he swore was the best in the city. We spread everything out on my dining table and spent the whole afternoon going through old deeds and records and photographs. And there it was, the deed transfer from 1943. A piece of land in the heart of Chicago, sold by a couple named Wei and Lin Chen to St. Trinity Cathedral. The sale price was listed as $1 with a handwritten note in the margin. Asterisk, for the glory of God and the hope of a community. Asterisk, I traced my finger over the names. Wei and Lin. My great-grandparents, they'd given away this land. They'd given it to the church because they believed in building something bigger than themselves. And now, 80 years later, I was standing in the middle of a conflict that had STA root with their generosity. It felt like a sign. A message from across the decades. I looked at Shin. I want to do something with this building. Not just foreclose on it. Not just sell it to the highest bidder. I want to rebuild it. For the community. The way my great-grandparents wanted. Shin smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. We spent the rest of the day planning. We talked about turning the cathedral into a community center, a space for kids to learn and families to gather, and people to find the kind of hope that didn't require a specific religion or a specific set of beliefs. That it would be expensive. It would be complicated. It might even take years, but it was the right thing to do. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building something instead of just tearing things down. 未完待续，明日更新终章。订阅的宝贝们不会错过最后的结局、教堂的归宿、林恩与沈玉的未来，还有那些等待被治愈的旧伤口，都会在下一章给出答案。6 months later, I stood in the nave of St. Trinity Cathedral and watched the last of the scaffolding come down. The building had been transformed. The stained glass windows had been restored, their colors brighter than I'd ever seen them. The old wooden pews had been replaced with flexible seating that could be arranged for community events. The altar had been converted into a small stage, and the choir loft was now a reading nook filled with donated books. It wasn't a church anymore. It was something else. Something better. I ran my hand along the stone wall, feeling the COL roughness beneath my fingertips. My great-grandparents had given this land to the church with the hope of building a community. 80 years later, I was finally finishing what they'd STA root. You're brooding again. I turned around. Shin was standing in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. He walked over and handed one to me, his fingers brushing mine. I'm not brooding, I said.
I'm reflecting.
There's a difference. Reflecting with a sad face is brooding. He leaned against the wall next to me, looking up at the ceiling. It looks good, Lin. You should be proud. I'm proud of us, I said. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Shin shrugged, but I could see the smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You would have figured it out eventually. You're the one with the business skills. And you're the one with the vision. I nudged him with my elbow. We make a good team. We do. We stood there in comfortable silence, sipping our coffee and looking at the space that had taken so much work, so much money, so many sleepless nights. The partnership with the community organizations had been finalized last month. The first round of programming was scheduled to start in 2 weeks. Kids from the neighborhood would come here for after-school tutoring. Families would gather for cultural events and ART classes, and everything in between. It was exactly what my great-grandparents would have wanted. Did you hear from your parents? Shin asked. I nodded. My mom calls every Sunday. My dad's doing better. The treatment's reworking for now. You going to see them again, maybe? I took a sip of my coffee. I'm not ready yet, but I'm not saying no forever. We're talking. That's enough for now. Shin reached over and took my hand. That's fair. You're allowed to take your time. I know. I squeezed his fingers. I have a good therapist. She reminds me of that every week. He laughed. She sounds like a SMART woman. She is. I turned to face him. And she also told me I should do something SCA-re every once in a while. Just to keep myself honest. Like what? I looked at him for a long moment. The morning light was coming through the stained glass, painting his face in shades of blue and gold. Like this, I said, and I kissed him. He kissed me back, soft and slow, like we had all the time in the world. When we finally pulled APART, he was smiling. That was SCA-re. Terrifying, I said. But worth it. We spent the rest of the morning walking through the building, checking off the last few items on our to-do list. The new lighting system, the accessible ramp, the kitchen in the old parish hall that would serve free meals 3 times a week. Everything was ready. The grand opening was scheduled for the following Saturday. We'd sent invitations to everyone who'd been involved, the contractors, the volunteers, the community leaders, the local politicians. We'd even sent one to Pastor Tom, though I wasn't sure if he'd come. I'd made peace with the church, finally. Not with everything they'd done, but with the fact that the church as an institution wasn't the same as the people who'd hurt me. There were good people still involved, people who wanted to rebuild and heal. I could work with them. On Friday night, the day before the opening, Shin took me out to dinner. Tony's, of course. Tony himself came out to hug us and kiss my cheeks. I told you, he said, pointing at Shin. I told you to keep this one. You were right, Shin said. You're always right. Tony beamed. I like that. I'm going to remember that. We sat in the same booth as our first date, and I felt a RMTH spread through my chest. So much had changed in 6 months. The anger was gone. The grief was still there, but it had faded to something manageable. Something I could CARRY without it weighing me down. I have something for you, Shin said, pulling a small box out of his pocket. I read at it. What is this? Open it. My hands were shaking as I lifted the lid. Inside was a key. An old-fashioned one, brass and worn, like something from 100 years ago. It's the original key to the cathedral, Shin said, from when it first opened in the 1940s. I found it in my father's papers, tucked into a drawer with the deed transfers. I looked at the key, at the way it caught the light. It's beautiful. I wanted you to have it, he said, because this place is yours. Not because you own it, but because you saved it. That's the only ownership that really matters. I looked up at him. Shun, you don't have to say anything. He reached across the table and took my hand. I just wanted you to know. You belong here. You belong in this city. And I'm really glad you showed up in my life. Me too, I said. I'm really glad you showed up in mine. We walked back to the cathedral after dinner. It was late, past midnight, and the streets were quiet. The building was dark, but the streetlights cast a warm glow over the facade. I can't believe it's really happening, I said. After everything, the fights, the lawsuits, the sleepless nights, we actually did it. We did, Shin agreed. And tomorrow, everyone gets to see it. You nervous, a little? He looked at me, but mostly excited. This is what I've been working RD my whole life. The last building on my father's list. The end of the story. Not the end, I said. Just a new beginning. He smiled. You're right. A new beginning. We sat on the front steps of the cathedral, side by side, looking out at the quiet street. The city was asleep, but we were awake, buoyed by a sense of something I couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe. Or peace. Can I tell you something? I said. Anything. I'm glad I got hurt, I said. I mean, I'm not glad it happened, but I'm glad I went through it. Because if I hadn't, I would have never found this place. I would have never found you. Shin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, that's the most honest thing anyone's ever said to me. It's the truth. I leaned my head on his shoulder. I don't think I would have appreciated any of this if I hadn't lost everything first. I needed to lose it all to understand what really mattered. Like what? Family. Community. People who stick around even when it's hard. I looked up at him. And you. Shin wrapped his arm around me and pulled me close. We sat there until the sky sta route to lighten, until the first sounds of the city waking up drifted in from the distance. This was the beginning of something new, not just for the cathedral, not just for the community. For me, the grand opening was everything we'd hoped for. People showed up in droves, families from the neighborhood, volunteers who'd helped with the renovations, even a few people who'd known my great-grandparents back in the day. They told me stories about Wei and Lin Chin, about the restaurant they'd run, about the way they'd open their doors to anyone who needed a meal. They were good people. One old woman said, gripping my hand, "They would have been so proud of you." I cried. I couldn't help it. Pastor Tom showed up the end of the event. He looked older than I remembered, more tired. He walked up to me with his hands clasped in front of him. "Lin," he said, "I want to apologize. For everything. For the way we treated you. For the way we let your parents down. You deserved better." I took a breath. "Thank you, Pastor. I appreciate that. I also wanted to tell you," he continued, "that I'm stepping down. I'm moving to a smaller church, a quieter community. I think it's time." "I wish you well," I said, and I meant it. He nodded and walked away. I watched him go and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Forgiveness wasn't something you gave once and forgot about. It was something you gave over and over in small pieces until one day you realized it didn't hurt anymore. I was getting there. The party went on until late evening. People danced on the newly polished floors, and kids ran around the reading nook, and the kitchen served warm food to anyone who wanted it. Shin found me in the back corner, watching it all. "You're doing it again," he said. "Doing what?" "That thing where you look like you're about to cry." I laughed. "I'm not. I'm just happy." "That's allowed, you know." He stepped closer and took my hand. "You're allowed to be happy." "I know." I looked at the crowd, at the kids and the families, and the joy radiating off every single person in the room. I think I finally understand what my grandfather meant in his letter. What did he say? He said the people who love you most will sometimes hurt you the most. But that's okay. Because you can still love them, even after the hurt. You can still be happy. You can still build something new. Shin squeezed my hand. "Your grandfather was a wise man." He was. I turned to face him. He was the best man I ever knew. And I think he'd be happy to see this.
To see me.
To see us. Us, Shin repeated, and he smiled. I liked the sound of that. We stood in the corner of the old cathedral, now filled with new life, and we watched the future unfold in front of us. It was messy and complicated and imperfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. Chen Wenwan, 感谢路追更的宝本。林恩的故事到这里就暂时告一段落了，但属于他的幸福生活才刚刚开始。如果你喜欢这个关于失去与找回、伤痛与治愈的故事，别忘了点击订阅按钮，下次开新闻会第一时间推送给你。我们下个故事见。